Nice. Okay, so today we want to talk about mysticism. And yeah, this one, I guess, feels quite mysterious to me, like where it's going to go. I think the sense is when we connect, there's just a nice feeling of, there's a lot of possibility, the space that opens up, and it can be kind of like very delicate and like fine, the things we talk about, or quite sort of like imaginal or magical. So just wanting to make space for those things to be present. And yeah, maybe just to like introduce where we are on the model. So we're in the bottom right hand corner. It's in whichever way you go, it's almost like it's like the last box on the thing. So it's kind of a way in which, when you've journeyed through all these different aspects of being, aspects of yourself, the place where you could end up is this sort of like mystical part of experience. And it's my belief that it's almost like an innate part of the universe, an innate part of everyone. Everyone has a kind of mystical aspect of them. And yeah, on the map, the sort of way into this part of experience is cultivating flow through practicing expression. That's just a few sort of things that are in the water, I guess. Do you want to talk a bit about what mysticism means to you?
I love to. It's interesting. I notice curiosity also around, for some reason, wanting to hear from you around what attracted you to inviting me to speak about mysticism.
Yeah, nice. Love the question. Yeah, we've met fairly recently, so it's been super nice to connect. And I think for me, there's something in my mystical parts it's almost like mysticism by its nature it's such a subtle, delicate thing that's really hard to talk about. Often it's like the part of us, the last part of us that we feel, because it's the most like refined or sort of small, and kind of like, I just get the image of like really tiny, almost like magic dust or something that can just easily be ignored or looked over or pushed down, and yeah, it's a part of me that I didn't know was there for a very long time, or like couldn't relate to very easily. Like looking back, I can see that it was there. And then I was like completely just lost in it and really overwhelmed, and it really in the beauty of it. But mostly that came out when I was on my own. And then like finding ways to express it through things like poetry, and just bits sort of started seeping out. And I think the sort of delicate, dust like almost kind of ethereal nature of it is even more so the case when you're in connection with someone. It's like so hard to be in that place with more than one. It's hard to be in that place with yourself, and then the more people, the more like things that are in the system, the harder it gets, because everyone kind of has to have this level of sensitivity. And yeah, just connecting with you, I was like, oh, this is totally present. It can be here. It's like safe for it to be here. I can kind of get a sense of your version of it happening. It was like very just the presence of that was possible was really it was just really nice and very, very magical to experience. So that was why.
Yeah, thank you. It's so interesting, just kind of speaking through what I was noticing as you were sharing. Like there's like a quality of the mystical experience that is so intrinsically relational. And there's this invitation into like a very subtle, sacred play, and kind of like asks for us, like I know in my experience and in meeting with you for the first few times, and almost noticing this like mundane wonder of being able to meet someone where we can just be in silence together, like not really know each other, meet over Zoom, and then just like a kind of dropping into this, yeah, this quality of belongingness. And yeah, the words again come back up around sacred play, just this awareness of, oh, there's kind of like this meshwork of something between us, and that we're also constitutive of. And even as you were speaking, I was almost like I could feel the imaginal imagery in like the field between us and in my body, that feels like the more that we nourish it with this kind of mystical awareness or attention, and it is very tender. It's almost like it feels like you're feeding something, like these like golden, almost or silvery like meshworks, like mycelia or like fascia between us. And it's just like, oh, there's something about the attentional flow and the quality of the attention, that subtlety and the care and the warmth and almost like the enchantment and the magic of it, that just like it almost radiates through, and something's like being fed by it. But it also feels like it's like feeding us back. It's kind of this like reinforcing, regenerative cycle that we all have this. I mean, just to like really echo back strongly the sense of every person has like a birthright connection to this mystical way of being in the world, this way of being like relating with like the earth, with the cosmos, with the anima mundi, with the divine, with source, with mystery, just like with whatever kind of finger pointing at the moon that seems to resonate with you and kind of strike those like chords in the heart of, oh, this feels like, oh, what is this? Like, I feel so nourished right now. And everything does take on this quality of like deep meaningfulness and interconnection, and yeah, the magic of the world, that it's like something within deeply recognizes as like a form of homecoming. It's like, oh, you can feed and nourish it and develop that almost like a capacity. Sometimes I feel like I remember now Robert Bea describing how the soul is like, it's almost like the sensing organ, or like a way, it's like this like organ of perception that allows you to unfold meaning and beauty and magic in the world. And I think like James Hillman says that too, but even out beyond the theory, it's like, you know, that as like a child when you're out in the world, like, you know, that when you're like wandering in the forest, and like somehow the way that the trees like are dappled with light, or you see faces in the shape of the bark, or you like sit and you see ants in formation on the ground, like moving in these strange rhizomatic patterns, and or like blades of grass that catch dew. There is like something around it where the mystical is actually utterly mundane. So I think that's probably, maybe that's like the most resonant expression of what mysticism feels like to me. It's like a very mundane mysticism. It is esoteric because it's like dear, and there's almost something that's like secret and sacred about it. And it's also mundane. It's like, yeah, it's like it's in your body.
Yeah, that's lovely. Yeah, as you described that, I was in tune, and the thing that you mentioned about Robert Bayer and James Hillman, there's a thing, it's almost like I've noticed that everyone kind of like has a soul sense. I guess this is the same thing, but everyone's very unique. And there's a way that when you get to this level, it's like it's almost like the ability to see hidden things in the world, but what you see depends on who you are. So for some people it's very kind of like archetypal, for other people it's very energetic. Yeah, and I think when you were describing about being a kid and sort of seeing and knowing, I was really connecting back into like feeling that this part is it's something that's been there kind of like the whole time. I'm just thinking, I remember my mum wrote a description of me when I was 1, and it still stands pretty well now, of like who I am. It's probably one of the best descriptions there is. There's a way that it's like there's something in us that it's like the things that you're pulled towards and the things that you see the depths of, the things that you really like resonate with on the deepest level. Yeah, and something in that meeting of the really mundane, the thing that's just like the most normal, the most you just kind of like hanging out in the most normal way with the most, yeah, just like kind of magical part. Yeah, just all of those things were kind of moving around as you were talking.
Yes. Yeah, I love the playfulness of even like the vibe I feel here. And yeah, like what's coming up for me is it's really interesting because when I was invited into just like the idea of having a conversation about mysticism, it's like there's something that has this, like the word mysticism almost has sometimes like, I don't know what it is, like the cultural meaning or kind of like semantic attractors that we've just kind of hooked onto this label. But there's something about it that feels almost so pristine, so self-serious, very, very, yeah, like I just imagine like someone who is like very, very feels like untouchable. I don't know. Mysticism feels like it's like the realm of something that is transcendent and far away, and it's about kind of this alleviation or escape from like the messiness of the human world and embodiment, and being able to almost like transcend to this pristine, like divine way of being. And I think that's just one way of interpreting mysticism. Like I think there's also a lot of, yeah, like the Sufi mystics, and like I think mysticism, like Taoist mysticism, for example, like there's a kind of mysticism that's also very, very like bright and playful and alive. And it's like, it includes like dance and desire and nature and kind of like trust and almost like in a deep attunement to the body. So I think there's like something in me that almost, I don't know where that projection or that story or that vibe of like a pristine transcendent mysticism comes from. But there's almost like a part of me that wants to state like that isn't the vibe that feels like true to me in my character, in my body, in the way that I would love for more people to feel like this deep access to the mystical and the magical and the kind of like sacred secrets that are inside of every, like it's like enfolded in every experience, where if you were to just to more like gently settle into your body, sort of, yeah, bring that tenderness to your awareness and that quality of like the sensitivity of the heart. It doesn't have to be, yeah, it feels like the door is like within.
Mm.
And that's why it feels, even though there's a quality of almost like like that spark of imposter syndrome that can come up, where it's like, who am I of all people to talk about mysticism? Like, I'm not a scholar of religious studies. Like, I don't really, I'm not even someone who's like, I haven't read Eckhart Tolle. Like, honestly, I think there is like an aspect to this where I think maybe the fact that I don't want to lock it up in the ivory tower. I don't want to lock up mysticism as something that like requires, I don't know, years of dedicated devotional training and only certain people have access to it. Like, there's something about that where it's like locking it behind gates doesn't feel very right. And yet also honoring the sacredness and the delicacy and the care, like, and like the deep, profound, yeah, it's like the profound, yeah, there's like a reason why we also want to protect it. So how do you share something that is so delicate with the world?
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah. Yeah, because there's a way that looking back through my experiences, even as a kid, I can see the mystical experiences, the ways that the universe would talk to me and I was kind of being pulled around and like, yeah, being given little clues and things like that in experience. But it's like, if you don't have you need a certain foundation to be able to relate to it in a kind of whole and healthy way. Yeah, there's a level of sort of like solidity in your being that comes from having done the heart work and the grief and the shadow work and the meditation practice and things like that, where you can then be open to relating to this part in a way that's like beautiful and loving and constructive, rather than something that's I guess not those things. And I think about the bit about being playful is so important to me. There's a way that I think that my it's almost like part of my kind of like a soul sense. There's like an adventurous streak to it and a kind of a joyful sort of jokey streak to it. And there's a way that one of my like directest forms of intimacy is jokes, and like having in jokes and little things like that. And there's a way that having that sort of little back and forth with the universe and how I relate to it is a huge part of my kind of mystical. There's a sort of like slightly slightly kind of disruptive quality to it, where it's not being too sort of sacred about the heart, too kind of, yeah, like keeping it pristine, like you said, much more like fluid and open, and just like being with what's actually, intimacy with what's actually here, what's actually present, rather than trying to create something that's different to the immediate experience.
Yeah, there's this, it's so interesting. And I think that's why there's always this focus on like the middle path. Like there's something around, I feel like when you speak to almost like, it's like the practice, and it feels like the devotional practice of posture and of containment and of kind of like dropping one state of awareness towards kind of this loving receptivity, this way of, yeah, it's like inviting in, and to some extent it's like surrendering to like the magic of the world and the way that it wants to meet you in its mystery. And sometimes it shows up and it's like, you know, beatific and light filled and beautiful. And then sometimes it shows up and it's like monstrous and shadowy and dark. And like holding the posture of welcoming both the dark and the light of the imaginal, and of kind of like the unrelenting actuality of life, kind of holding those polarities in its innate wholeness. Like that is something that's really, that requires a kind of collective training and also mutual support, because I mean, just to like position this work of teaching awakening or mysticism, and I really admire like what you're doing, because there's like an aspect of this where I'm both like feeling the wariness of, you know, sharing something that can feel quite powerful, and there's like a sense of responsibility around it, and then there's also this calling of, oh no, something about this needs to be like made more mundane and democratized. And it's not about, again, like keeping it for like the special few. There's something about like our collective zeitgeist, like the ghost of our time, like on basically on like a species level, where we're being asked to like fold in and integrate like the mystical beings that we actually are. It's like there is like a divinity within that's like almost, it's not outside anymore, it's like inside, and it's wanting to almost like burst forth from our skin. And that's an intense transformative process. And for some, maybe it takes like years, for others it takes lifetimes, like it's whatever. And even as I say that, like I try to contain it within a temporal frame. It's like, it's not, it also isn't that. So it's really, yeah, I think like ways in which we're able to now give voice with a quality of both. Yeah, like I think a willingness to be a little bit messy with how we're communicating this, because we're sort of building new scaffolds and cultures around how we can relate with spiritual experience in a very, very rigorous, caring, like true to our time, true to the fact that we're in a period where a lot of people, for right reasons, are like highly skeptical of religiosity or spiritualism or anything that might feel like a little bit exploitative or woo. Like, I think I just want to name that, because when we're talking about the mystical, there is like there's like a very, very real dynamic that's present around what it means to relate with mystery, and especially relate with mystery within community, within relationality with other people who are also like, we're like, if we're gods, we're like flawed gods, you know, we're messy, we have like dark faces and we have light faces. And it's like, how do we heal from our attachment to, like, again, like this pristine perfection of what divinity is supposed to feel like, and in fact kind of relate with each other sacredly with like a healthy amount of skepticism and kind of sovereign discernment around what is trustworthy, what is aligned, what is safe, and then like know that it's kind of like an unfolding journey, where if at some point you're like, I think I get it, it's like I get it now. It's like, oh, that's probably the point at which it's important to, you will encounter something that will probably humble you back to the ground. And when that happens, it's like to be able to receive and meet that as a gift and not simply as, to be able to receive that as a gift, like the challenges that we're meeting together individually, collectively, as like a species on this planet, in the cosmos. There's like a wound and a gift in what we're collectively meeting.
Yeah, that's amazing. Really, really nicely put. Yeah, I'm really with. I've played a little bit with mapping the archetypes onto the map as well. The archetypes that I use, and mysticism is the meeting of the heartful demon and sovereign. So the way that you kind of brought those in that was just like, yeah, it was almost like the thing that we're sort of both, I guess, like tuning into and feeling the important aspects of that kind of coming through. And yeah, when I say heartful demon, there's a way that we did a group sort of shared imaginal practice around it once, and kind of like explored what that looks like. And the idea is kind of like, yeah, it's being really deeply in touch with your own flawed nature, the bit of you that is like imperfect, that has the darkness, that has the light and the dark is whole. It's also, I think, being really deeply connected to the thing that is, yeah, like most important in the world from your heart. So I think you mentioned surrender, and that's kind of like a couple of boxes before mysticism. And for me, it's just like truth and love are the things that I'm surrendered to, and I'm like, that's it. And the kind of like heartful demon quality is almost like staying connected with your heart, being really connected to that, but being willing to be a bit disruptive, be perceived as kind of like somehow, yeah, not behaving in this sort of like good boy and girl way, but being a bit more sort of wild and being in touch with the truth of your experience, finding places for all of that to express. And yeah, the phrase that came out as my sort of like heartful demon phrase was, it was like an image of someone whose head was just sort of like becoming a universe. And
Wow.
then the phrase was, we cannot stay silent about the things that matter. So it was like really touching into something where it's like, yeah, speaking up is the thing. And that feels very woven into my mysticism as well, in terms of kind of I guess what I'm tuning into and what I'm relating with and what I'm expressing through my various ways of expressing. Yeah.
Wow. I'm just so intensely resonating with what you shared, including an image that's also been present with me around like almost ripping my chest open and there being a black hole at the center of my being. And just like, and sort of this awareness of like, there's something that we like there's something that we fear sometimes around like black holes or mystery or like that which is dark. And yet there's also something around like, it's like around almost like the density and gravity of black holes that like life orbits around it, like it draws in, and like especially when it pulls it into a kind of harmonic equilibrium, it's like whole galaxies circle around like the still point of a black hole. And I think there's like there's something around, I mean, letting that gravitational attractor like kind of erupt forth. Like when you were describing the heartfelt like demon, I like that you call it, I always call it a daemon.
Okay. Yeah.
But I like that you call it a demon, because I think, yeah, it's like we often associate demons with like the hell, like creatures of the hell realm. And it feels like a kind of integration of that dark and the light is like a recognition of the demon or the daemon as like, as an expression of one's desire, of one's eros, of one's like creative impulse and life force. And there is like a relationship with that eros and that kind of daemonic impulse with like the agapic field, with kind of like pristine wholeness, with this eternal, like the field of eternality and love. And there is like some like the polarity between the two of like the particularities of one's unique desire and like my calling, it's like my soul's calling, threaded in and weaved into the fabric of like the codependent arising of reality, like always becoming, always whole. Yeah, and not collapsing into one or the other. It's like not collapsing into one or the other, but like really, really like staying with that. Like, yeah, it's almost like the sacred tension, like the sacred aliveness, the generativity of that tension, this like longing for more, yet like this sense of like everything is enough. Like, can you both like feel like everything is completely like abundantly more than enough, and yet you still want more, you still want more, like life wants more life. And that's like a that is inherent in a way to, yeah, what I was checking in with earlier, like the cosmic appetition, like it's like this innate desire of the cosmos to know more of itself, to make more of itself, and to know that we're just like one diffracted whole in that.
Yeah, so nice. So nice. Is there anything else coming up? That feels very whole to me, but is there anything else coming up that's really important?
Yeah, this I guess I'll just say that this is really fun. I think there's like, I think it's the fact that it feels fun and it feels bright, and it doesn't feel like bypassing. It doesn't feel like we're like hiding stuff and kind of like slothing it under a carpet or something like that. But there is like kind of, yeah, the experience of all of reality is this playground for us to discover and kind of enchant and be enchanted by. Yeah, like there's and maybe this is like, this is the part of me that wants to, it's like bring heaven and earth close to each other and just be like, it's not separate realms, it's actually, it's like dimensions or attunements to different frequencies that are coexisting like together. So I feel like there's this way in which when sacredness and the mystical and the magical and the kind of enchanted cosmos is able to weave into something as mundane as like our, like the way our cities are built, the way our policies are designed, the way like the internet is, like our technological systems, like they all have like soul. They all have animist kind of aliveness to them. And just to be able to relate with all of these other, also more than human beings, where we're like, oh, it's not just like a ghost or God. It's, I can feel the divinity in this like computer, this weird like box. It's just like this like thing made of metals, mined from the earth, and somehow like we've connected the electrical signals to be able to like vibrate like currents across, like in the air, so that I'm somehow from Toronto, Canada, talking to you, Rosa, in the UK. Like it's, there's like something about that that's actually so mundanely magical. And it's like, as I'm describing it, I'm like, that's wild. And like, how is that happening right now? And isn't it amazing? Like, and isn't that enough in itself that we can just connect with each other? And unfold worlds from that connection. Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you, Rosa.
Yeah,
Thank you for
that's
playing.
amazing. I love all that. Yeah, it's really nice. And I think yeah, maybe for people listening, it's nice to like bring it back to the practicals. And maybe for people listening, there's a way that if this all sounds quite like far away, I think one of the things that I really valued about connecting with you is that and this is just like a practical thing that you can do with people, I guess. It's like every time we meet, you invite us to just sit in silence together, and then like wait and be in silence until we're ready. One person is ready to check in. And in that time, just having the feeling of sensing like what's present, and just having time to get in touch with all those other parts of experience that are in this model and beyond, kind of like the feelings and the subtle body and the connection, and just like really be with experience. And then afterwards, just like taking a bit of time to share what was coming up and how we were feeling. And like sometimes there's cool intersections, or sometimes there's something that feels deeply personal. And yeah, just it can be things, it can be sort of like simple things like that, where you're just kind of like opening the door to connecting from a more kind of soulful place that yeah, is the like practical bit behind it, I guess. And yeah, also like you say, that just the animism of the whole world can be kind of like brought into that as it gets more and more complex. That's really cool.
Well, thank you, Rosa.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me into your game, your world.
Thanks for sharing your world with me. Nice.